Gentlemen, welcome to Anything Cricket. Let's talk. We've got Roland Butcher, Deighton Smith, Basil Butcher Jr., and a whole lot of, some guys with one main thing in common, and that is the joy of success. What success am I talking about, Deighton Smith? Good evening to you.
Good evening, Philip, and good evening to all who are listening. The same success as making everyone in the Caribbean happy at the moment. It's a wonderful thing to win a test match against the best team in the world. And I'm sharing that joy like everyone else. I saw some things that I really loved in that match, apart from the fact of winning. I saw some young men display some heart and some fight that has been sorely lacking for a long time. I saw some men playing cricket and representing me and the rest of the Caribbean with a smile on their face. I don't know if you noticed it. Even in the toughest of times in that test match, a lot of those young men were smiling, they were laughing, they were enjoying what they were doing, and they were giving it everything they had. I think they deserve the highest praise. And I think we have to ask ourselves, and I hope we have a lot of discussion on that tonight, how did we win a test match like that? What are some of the things that contributed to that success? I think we should really explore that in our discussions tonight.
Okay, Basil, the joy of success, and Deighton touched on it. I suggested that we all share a common emotion right now, but well, you speak for yourself.
I would say ditto to all what Deighton said. And most importantly, I would say this was a total team victory. Rightfully so, young Shamar Joseph gets a lot of the accolades for that outstanding spell. But if we look at the match carefully, he would have never been in that position had it not, for example, Hodge and De Silva putting on a partnership of 149, when at that point I was so frustrated that I said, don't tell me and get bowled for 150 again at 64 for 5. And the two of them steered the ship out of rough waters, and then Sinclair coming later down and chipping in with 50 to get us across 300 to put us in good stead for that test match. So I think one of the things as Deighton correctly said, all these youngsters, with a smile on the face. I was just rewatching part of the game just now, and as they were going out to start a play of that day, Hodge, the camera on the field is saying today is a day to be great, and a big smile on his face. The characters that we have in the team really warmed the hearts of the Australians and fans around the world. What was so interesting at one point in the match, when Roach was on a hat trick, the commentator says Brisbane is usually a place that is hostile to the foreign teams. And as Roach was running in, the cry when a crowd goes, "Whoa!" behind the bowler. They were doing that for Roach. They wanted to see Roach get a hat trick against their team, which, in the Clive Lloyd days and so on, there's no way an Australian team would have been doing that for Holden Roberts or any one of them.
Well, it's interesting you said Roach was on a hat trick. Roach was on a hat trick, so Roach did get a couple of things. I was reading somewhere where somebody was saying that he's probably played his last test match, but who knows? Maybe I was a bit tired and not really.
He did a Lazarus.
Good evening to Roland Butcher, the man who, let's say, had maybe a bit more of a hand than the three of us in sort of like scripting the outcome of this test series, a 1-1 draw between Australia and the West Indies. Roland Butcher, welcome to Anything Cricket. Let's talk.
Yeah, thank you, Philip, and good to see Deighton and my good cuz Basil Jr. there. Yeah, great to be back on the show. Obviously, everything Deighton and Basil have said have been said a million times now, I guess, in the last week or so. I would just really like to see a fantastic performance by a very young and inexperienced team, very well led by Craig Brathwaite. This sort of performance is not the first time that Craig Brathwaite has led a team to do that. Let's remember a couple of years ago, he took an equally inexperienced side to Bangladesh and got the result. So a lot of credit must go to him for his leadership. He would have liked to have got a few more runs, but I think leading this pack of players, and they responded. That was the important thing. A lot of uncapped players and players who have hardly played any Test cricket, going into the hardest players to play cricket against the best team in the world. And to come out all square really is beyond belief. So a lot of credit must be given to that entire squad that went to Australia. They had to endure, before leaving, a lot of ridicule, had to endure even more ridicule while in Australia because of their inexperience. But out of all of that, they still were able to triumph and produced in that final Test match, one of the finest performances ever by a West Indian side. Loved by the Australians. I've had so many calls from my friends in Australia during the series. They love this team. Jamal Joseph, they love because of his exuberance, not just his terrific bowling, but the energy that he brings to the team. Everybody's responded. I can't hold my hat any higher as to, salute the job that these guys have done. It's a fantastic job. And I'm really, really glad for them.
But Butcher, Roland, in fact, before we go back to the others, you talk about the lovely job that the guys have done. I know you're not the sort of person to run around shouting and, pumping fists or anything like that. But it must be a sense of personal satisfaction too, in terms of the job that the selectors did.
Of course, I would say, Desmond and myself, and you know that, we came in for a lot of pressure, a lot of ridicule in selecting this side to go to Australia. Who were these guys? I mean, people question, who Jamal Joseph was, where did he come from? Obviously, they question all the other young players. What have they done? So really, Desmond, here's, myself and Andre Cooley, who are the selectors. As you know, the captain has a say in the discussion of the selection of the squad, but he doesn't have a vote in terms of choosing the players. But his input was also very good.
You're saying whose input you're talking about?
The captain. The captain. Yeah, the three selectors are really was Desmond Haynes, the chief selector, myself, and of course the coach Andrew Cooley. The captain is involved in the discussions, but does not have a vote in terms of what the squad is. But his input was also valuable. After all, it's a team effort. It's not the selectors and someone else. It's a team effort. And, we came up with this group as being, what we believe would be the best young group, not just for now, but for the future. We obviously knew the magnitude of the task they were taking. Teams with much more experience than this team struggles against Australia because the reason for that is that Australia are a phenomenal team, and especially at home. But yes, we stuck to our guns. We believe that these young players, could represent themselves and represent the region well. And people would say that we stuck our necks out. I don't believe we stuck our necks out. I just think that we use common sense and a good grasp of a player. And, between us, Desmond might not want to hear this, but, we've got over 100 years experience at the highest level. And
even if Desmond has 99.
What an admission.
No, but, that's a lot of years,
Yeah.
Desmond and myself, I've been involved in the professional game at a level for over 50 years.
Mhm.
And Desmond similarly. So that's a lot of years. But no, yeah, we did what we had to do in the best interest of West Indies cricket, and I'm very, very grateful that the rest of the Caribbean eventually became very happy at the outcome.
Basil,
Yes.
you got a lot to respond to.
No, I agree. I actually
We would forgive you for
Roland,
being merciful given the relationship between you guys.
actually me and Roland had a discussion about the team prior where I pointed out some things, and when you see, my position always about selection, because many years ago my father admonished me about selection. When he said to me, Skipper, you always complain, tell the top, but selectors this year. How much you watch the players as much as the selectors. You got all the information as much as the selectors. And that gave me pause. And from that conversation, I may have my views on a player and so on. But if the selectors, when a selector would give you their rationale and so on, and it's a call, right? The call may work, the call may not work. But once the rationale is sound, I can't quarrel with the selector. You see? So, I mean, myself and Roland had conversation already about this, and I voiced my opinion about certain players. And when he gave me the point of view that where they were coming from, I came with a conversation. All right, boss, I can't argue with you anymore. No is no. What we got to see is how the players progress on the field of play, and it turned out brilliantly. As I said to him at the time, and I said it prior to this, when I saw the team pick, my first inclination was, I said, these youngsters gonna get a good baptismal, which indeed they got. And I was looking to see which of these players would have shown me signs that they belong on this stage to play Test cricket. And I must say that what I was looking for, I saw that in several players. You saw it at different levels, like obviously Joseph, Hodge, Mackenzie, Graves, Sinclair with the bat. Those guys showed you that they have something to offer at the Test level. And that is my thing. Winning the Test series, for me, is beyond, was never in my imagination. And that is a joyful result, on top of seeing some young players show us that they got they have these capabilities, similar to what we saw in Bangladesh when Craig Brathwaite took that team there, and we beat the team 2-0, and a more experienced team a couple of years prior lost the series in Bangladesh. So on those points,
Basil, before you even get to any further points, or before we go to Deighton, let me quickly just drop in there to support what you were saying your dad taught you. Of course, it doesn't mean that you can't have sound, meaningful debate over selection.
Yes, of course.
It doesn't mean that, but what he said was quite true, that the selectors, if they're doing their job, they should have seen a lot more cricket than any of us would have seen. But something that gets to the point of ridiculous. What do I mean by that? There are a lot of social situations now where you have cricket discussion online and so on. And I remember in a group, not one that I'm very closely associated with, but another group that guys discuss some cricket online and so on. I wish I could remember the Barbadian player who was in question, but this player was selected for I don't remember if it was the A team or whatever. But the comment that was made was that, who was that guy? Well, he never get picked for Barbados. He never even get picked for Barbados, and the person was being critical of the selection. Now, that's not something that I would respond to, because to my mind, that person should know that they should not even have an opinion, because the particular player in mind at the time was a player who may not have represented Barbados a whole lot, but he represented another franchise. He played, right? And it's a player that I was accustomed to seeing day in, day out in local cricket. I knew the guy, all right? Obviously, the selectors knew the guy. And the guy who didn't even know the guy's background really should have kept his mouth shut. So there are times when really and truly, yes, you have the right to get in discussion. Chats and so on are good for discussion. I wouldn't say not, but you've got to know when you don't know. I'm not going to get into any discussion on rugby and be saying things that I don't know anymore. What do you know about rugby? American football, I'm now getting to enjoy it a lot more. You think I'm going to sit with people who watch American football every weekend and argue with them about who's this or who's that? So sometimes we got to know when we should be students of the game.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I'll just say a quick word on selection, and then I'll make a few more comments that I think are very relevant that go well beyond selection. I couldn't argue about whether any of these guys should be selected or not, and I'll tell you why. Because we've had this discussion a lot of times. You have to ask yourselves, who did they leave out that has a first-class average of 40 or even 35?
They said you're too kind, or even 30.
Right.
But it's your argument, so you go ahead.
Yeah,
Right,
Deighton,
exactly.
Deighton, before you think, I don't want to forget
Set the
this.
bar too high, Basil.
No, when myself and Roland had a conversation, that was a topic, and I had no
So
comeback.
who did they leave out that had 200 first-class wickets or a first-class bowling average of 25? My point is, and we've had this discussion over and over again, we keep getting into big arguments about a guy who averages 27 versus a guy who averages 25, and trying to say one should be playing Test cricket and one should not. In my view, the real issue here isn't whether any of these guys have talent, because a lot of the guys that we've used and discarded have talent. The guys who are in Australia clearly demonstrated that they have talent. What it really is about is what makes long-term success. And here are some things that I really want to say. First of all, you know the old routine we used to go through. When we're preparing for anything, so we picked Philip Hackett. This is his first tour. We have a 2-week camp in Antigua, and then off he goes to Australia. Now, anybody who knows anything about the ground at Coolidge in Antigua knows that it is as far away as you can get from Australia as Australia is from the Caribbean. And yet we give this guy 2 weeks up there, we send him up there, and then we cuss the guy, we cuss the selectors, we cuss everybody. But in this case, and I have to give, I've wrongly criticized CWI when I felt they did it, but I have to give them kudos. I thought the idea of sending a lot of these guys on an 18 tour to South Africa was much better preparation than anything I've seen us do in a long time. Those wickets in South Africa offer you some bunks, you get a little bit of movement, and that is much better for them in terms of preparation than they would have had here in a lot of these low, slow wickets in the Caribbean. So it's one thing to pick a guy because you believe he has it in him, but then what we've done in the past very often is pick this guy and then throw him into the wolves. In this case, of these young fellas that were there, Kirk McKenzie, Kevin Hodge, Kevin Sinclair, all of them were in South Africa and did well. They had at least one good innings in South Africa or one good bowling performance. But Joseph, I watched the games in South Africa, by the way. And so when people question Shamar Joseph, I smile because I said this guy has something. I watched him bowl. It wasn't just that I heard.
People who questioned his selection?
Yes.
Really?
Well, when I say him, collectively with the others. They talk about these fellas who've never played a lot of cricket.
They just started to break your flow, but this is a game where people need to know when not to speak. Now, I didn't see as much of the South African tour as you did. And you know the cricket now is being played in one or two chosen places, so you don't get the cricket. Cricket West Indies have not been able to find a way, unfortunately, to keep the interest of cricket amongst the masses in the Caribbean. It's more like a private club now. And therefore, I can only recall seeing Shamar Joseph in part of a CPL game. In other words, I was not familiar with Shamar Joseph. And if there was
Right.
one player that I never, the only comment I may have made that may have been relevant to Shamar Joseph, may have been, was that I felt that, and I think everybody knows by now that I felt that, and still do, felt that Imlak was a waste man. Nothing to do with Imlak's ability. I just felt you didn't need, for such a short tour, a specialist backup keeper who had not really distinguished himself when one of your recognized batsmen I knew could keep. But I'm not going to bet that all over again. And I felt that that position could have been used in many different ways, or one of many different ways. And one of them could have been to have, let's say, like a Shannon Gabriel or a more experienced fast bowler. Not necessarily that he's even going to be your match winner, but just to add a bit of experience. Now, that would be indirectly related to Shamar Joseph, because that would have been another experienced person, like along with Roche did that job quite well. So what I'm saying is, how do you criticize selections when you don't even know the players? I don't think there can't be 100 fans in the Caribbean and Dayton who would have seen Shamar Joseph bowl in the first class match.
I tell you, right. I tell you what struck me about it when I watched him in South Africa. I think going there was great because bowling on that type of wicket gives him a better feel for the type of lengths he has to bowl on that type of wicket. But what struck me was this: in the last match, he got a 5-wicket haul, I think, in the last innings. And the first thing that struck me, I didn't know the guy, is that each spell he bowled, he got wickets in it. Now, we struggle to get wickets with the old ball normally.
Right.
But he got wickets with the new ball, he got wickets in the middle, he got wickets late down. And that was because when I watched him bowl, I was stunned for a man with such little experience and such little exposure, and I don't know of any training that he's had, how often he hits a good length for the particular wicket he's bowling on. And it was clear from watching him bowl that he does something with the ball. He gets the ball to move both ways. So if you got that kind of pace and you're hitting the right lengths and you're doing something with the ball, you're going to get a good result. But in his third spell in some of those matches, I was a little bit taken aback by the fact that he was still bowling fast. So kudos to him. But beyond that, it was clear that people like Joshua Da Silva needed something to get him back on track with his batting. And he got some runs in that tour, which I'm sure would have helped him in Australia, even though he failed in the first match. The point is, you could see his batting in the second match, where he was more disciplined in terms of leaving balls that he was looking at before, and things like that. That preparation in South Africa, kudos to all those who had anything to do with that decision. I think it was great. Secondly, I think we have to talk about leadership. Roland alluded to it. That team was very well led, and I suspect from what I saw, it was more than the captain, because I've not seen a West Indies team for a long time that had such clear bowling plans. Every time a batsman come to the wicket, you could see there was some clear idea about how do we want to get this guy out. Obviously, bowling plans don't always work, but at least you can see for every person there was a plan. I thought that was fantastic. And I think you got to give kudos to those off the field. I'm sure all this didn't happen in the absence of Andre Coley and his team. And you have to say, I think Andre Coley, am I right, was at the academy with some of these same young fellas?
Yeah.
Right. So he would have had an opportunity to work with them before now. So not only would he have known them when he was selecting them, but he would also have known what he needed to do with them. I thought that was great. I thought some of the adjustments.
He was with them in South Africa also, Deighton.
Right. So I'm saying all this to say that clearly these guys just didn't turn up in Australia one day and said, we're going to win a test match. There was clear planning in terms of the conditions there, in terms of the leadership around them, the planning and the management of how they're going to approach the game. I haven't seen that for a long time. And all these are things that I think we should all be happy about. And lastly, I am so impressed with the attitude of those young men. Smiling every day and really working hard. But I'll give you an example. In the first test match, Kevin Hodge nicked off twice, playing away from his body on a wicket that was bouncing. That's a recipe for disaster. In the second test match, it looked to me, for the naked eye, I don't know if this was right, but it looked to me like he was batting a little closer to his off stump. I think he seemed to be on a different guard. And anything outside the fifth stump line, he was leaving. So this is not a case now of you've heard me talk about this before about how our players keep making the same mistakes over and over and over. But here was some planning. This guy made this mistake twice in the first test. Comes back in the second test. There's a clear difference in his approach. And the result was a fantastic partnership. So I thought there were a lot of things that we should take note of that contributed to that victory. And I hope that I see more of these things every time these guys come out.
Yes, well, someone alluded to, I think it was Basil talking earlier, talking about South Africa, Deighton, so I'm picking up from there. And a bit earlier, Baz, in talking about, maybe before we came on air, was talking about Ross and Chase and Sinclair factors. And he reminded us that in the last tour of Australia, Roston picked up 3 wickets and scored a half century. 3 of the other fast bowlers combined picked up 3 wickets. And therefore, he was wondering at that point why Roston maybe, why was he abandoned as opposed to maybe getting the experience of going to South Africa in the hope of recapturing his best form. I think the best person to give us some insight, without giving away trade secrets, would be Roland, because Roland was part of that selection policy. Roland, we're not asking you to give away any trade secrets or to do anything to get yourself in trouble, but help us understand why. And Ross and Chase, by the way, I would say is an example here. But it's not just about Ross and Chase. We have thrown away. We have got a policy where we throw away players. In fact, I'll give you all and the viewers a chance to correct me if I'm wrong. But over the last 30 years, Brian Lara has obviously been fantastic. So too Chanda Paul. So too Gale. I'm hard pressed to think, and I think I've got to be forgetting somebody. To think
Sarwan.
Sarwan.
Well, I mean, if you're talking about 40 average.
What I was going to say was that, and I'm not going to argue against putting Sarwan there. In fact, if each of you find an example that I missed out, we can still be woefully short. My point, it will not in any way diminish my point. What I'm saying is that apart from those few that we were struggling to come up with, all of the other batsmen who have played for West Indies in the last 30 years and who started with either really well or with some promise, declined swiftly. By swiftly, I mean, let's say those who started maybe mid-20s in terms of age, declined by the year 8 to 30. All of them, apart from the few that we have mentioned, and unless we miss 1 or 2. So this is not, and we were quite happy to throw them away and try again. And if you hear the talk now, even now, Mackenzie is probably one of the most popular batsmen in the region right now. What happens in 2 years' time if he goes in the same direction as a Kyle Mears? You ready to throw him away and look for the next new thing? So, Roland, it's with that background that I'm throwing the question to you. Why wouldn't a Ross and Chase, for example, be afforded an 18th tour, especially when he's not necessarily doing anything else that could get in the way of that?
Philip, one thing that I will not do is discuss individual selections or non-selections. That's for sure.
Okay.
But what I would say is that in selecting a squad, the final 15 is usually out of an original 30. You have what we try to do is cover every position with another person, because if an opener is injured, you must have a replacement opener. If a number 3 is injured, so we always look at a group of 30 players. That's your 15. These are your shadow 15. You then have to look at how you want to play the game. You then also have to look at the roles you want players to take up. Now, I will just speak about one thing where selectors were given a lot of criticism in the white ball series against England for not selecting Darren Bravo in the 50-over game. Now, Darren Bravo scored a lot of runs as a middle order batsman, and obviously he did really well, which was fine. But the space became available for an opener after Justin Graves got injured. So Keon Utley was selected because Keon Utley is the opener. Now, people were up in arms that Bravo should have been selected. Would you select him and put him to open? Right. So you've got roles to fill. So you fill the roles. If there was a middle order batting space, consideration would have been given, but the space became available for an opener. As I said, so really, I'm not going to say much about why someone played and why someone didn't play.
Yeah,
but
understood.
What I would say is that when you're selecting a side, lots of reasons. You go into a lot of reasoning, and the average folk out there believe that selecting the side is you write down 15 names and that's what it is. It doesn't work. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
We have
Agreed.
to take advice from the medical people. We have the analytics. We have all of these things to deal with before you select the side. And then me personally, as a selector, I don't just rely on my own self or my own eyes in relation to a player. I mean, my style has always been that at the end of every first-class game, I would call all the umpires and ask the umpires who impressed in the game, etc., etc. I would also call the coach of each team who took part in the game and ask them who was impressive on the opposition side. I don't ask them about their team because you don't want a coach to be biased in terms of what he says about his players. So I ask each coach to talk about the opposition. So because I believe you have to have many eyes to make a decision. You can't see everything yourself. So that's certainly the way that I operated. And the umpires and the coaches were very, very happy with that because it's something that didn't happen before. And, the umpires, how can you not involve the umpires? They stand in the field 6 hours a day. They can tell you if Deighton Smith is a frightened batsman, if he likes pace, if he shirks from bowling, all of those things, the knowledge you can get from an umpire. The umpires really appreciated the fact that, we were asking them.
That's somebody respects them enough to seek their opinion.
Yeah. And they were only too keen. And listen, I'll tell you what information they were given was the information that I was gonna give myself. So
it confirms what your thoughts were.
It confirmed what my thoughts were. That they were spot on. So that was a good resource for me, both the umpires and the captains.
But Roland, I do respect what you said about not wanting to discuss the individual player, and I guess that's part of the reason to why I made sure that you understood that it's not about rust and chase. It is about having players who we know belong because they performed at one stage, but they're going through some stuff. And do we just get rid of them and look for the next popular thing or whatever? I remember some years ago, I don't know if you guys remember, Roy Fredericks, the West Indies opening batsman at the time, #1 batsman at the time, and he was going through a bit of a rough time. You don't ask me who was touring the West Indies at the time, but Roy Fredericks, it seemed, played in every match that was possible. In those days, you had, a match, you had like a Presidency 11, they would play against Guyana and so on. And I remember he played in a particular match, it may have been the Guyana match, for example, against the tourists, and he still didn't get any runs. And I remember that they flew him from the ground before the match was completed. Of course, he batted twice and flew him to take part in another game somewhere else. So he would be in time to take part in a game elsewhere because they wanted him. In other words, you're going to tell me now Roy Fredericks was this, that, but the point is, they valued the potential contribution from Roy Fredericks. It was easier for them to help Roy Fredericks rediscover his form, they're going to look for a new opening batsman. And I think we need to embrace that mentality. No, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that we don't look for young talent. We've always got to be on the lookout for young talent. But if we believe that we now have a formula where we pick some guys, they do well for a season, and when they start to struggle, we just look for a younger, new set of guys. We will never.
Philip,
back
they
to
haven't
you.
asked me to do it, but
Go
permit me
ahead.
to defend the selectors a little bit here.
Hold on. Before I'm glad you put it that way. This is not meant to be an attack on the selectors.
No, I didn't think it
I
was.
don't even
but
think
I
the
just
selectors are the
fair.
main ones that fall here. I think the
That's
ones
the point
who
I'm going to
fall-
make. That's exactly
Okay.
the point I'm going to make.
Right, go ahead.
Because I think selectors are in a very difficult position. So, like you quite rightly said, a guy is, he's demonstrated before that he's capable.
Oh,
And this is why I mentioned the things outside selection I mentioned just now.
Mm.
So let's take Kirk McKenzie, for instance.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to take a current player on purpose.
right.
We all know that every coach in the world now is looking at footage of Kirk McKenzie. And they're asking themselves, how do we bowl at this guy? What do we do to restrict him and to get him out? They would have seen by now that Alec Athanaze will be restrained for a little while, but sooner or later he'll throw his hands at the ball. And if you get a little bounce and movement, he'll make off. So they'll be making those kinds of notes. So my issue is this. Let us say that they come up with good plans, and for the next 2 or 3 series, they are successful against these guys. They don't make it right. As a selector, Roland Butcher or anybody else knows that there's a problem here now. This guy needs something to correct whatever issue he has at the moment. But the fact that they picked him before means that they believe he has something in him.
Mm.
But they cannot correct the issue that he has to deal with now. And I said this 100 times, I'm going to say it until somebody deals with it. So there has to be some mechanism by which you work with these guys outside of an international game. So when somebody figures out,
And you're
how
not
to
talking
bowl-
about the 2-week camp before the tour, right?
that nonsense, rubbish. I'm not. So when somebody figures out how to bowl at Kirk McKenzie, which by the way I was very impressed with his attitude and approach. He never ever seemed flustered at the crease. He never seemed intimidated. He always seemed confident, and from early in his innings, he was willing to play strokes to say that I belong here, and I was fantastic attitude. But somebody figured out how to bowl at him. When he comes back to the Caribbean, somebody here has to figure out how to counter what they're doing now. That's the way international sport works. They figure out what they're going to do to you. Then when you see what they're doing, somebody here has to figure out what are the adjustments that Kirk McKenzie has to make to counter what they're doing. That's the bit that I've not seen in 25 years. We need to fix that.
They think you
Right,
pause so you
Deighton,
can get Basil to
Deighton,
get a recorder to record that for me. The reason for that is, Deighton, that here you are, a former director of Cricket West Indies, a former vice president and president as well of the Barbados Cricket Association, or only vice president?
Vice president. I acted as president. I was
Acting as president of the, we can go with the highest thing now, a former acting president of the Barbados Cricket Association, a talented cricketer himself. You got to take my word for it, guys. We were at school together. And you are saying what I've been trying to say, but you just haven't called the word. That is, you have just described what I mean when I talk about a high performance program. So for those who don't know what Philip Hackett is talking about, that's what I'm talking about. No, if you want to tell me that that's not what it's called, I ain't argue over what it's called. I don't argue over the small stuff, right? You need a program that keeps the players current, if you want to put it that way, because it is a battle. Years ago, when Seymour Nurse and Gary Sobers and those guys turned up in England, people were seeing them for the first time. And, you know, by the time they worked them out, the tour finished. You know?
But Philip,
hold on. But so nowadays, right, a fella playing cricket in Crab Hill, or in that place where where Joseph came from.
Oh,
Barcara. He on Instagram and he all over the place before he even get to Georgetown. So by the time he get to Australia or wherever, you got him covered. So you've got to have somebody constantly helping these guys. It's like a battle. Yeah, Butcher. Yeah, Roland, sorry.
But Philip, before before you wait for other persons to do that, the first thing you have to do, you have to do that analysis yourself.
Good, very good in theory. Go ahead.
You don't wait for Australia to work out how to bowl at Kirk McKenzie.
That's very good in theory, but go ahead.
But I think he's going somewhere. You're not understanding here, Philip. I think he's right.
That analysis.
But no, I'm not saying it's wrong, but I would come in later. I want to finish.
Right, Philip. What I'm saying,
I think he's talking about our coaches here doing that analysis on our players.
We have to now. Every player, who played in this series, you have to do an analysis on every player, strength and weaknesses, because that's what the opposition will do.
Basil, get that. Turn back on that tape record and record Roland, because Roland is also looking at the other. Okay, Roland, forgive me. I thought you meant that the injury that Kirk McKenzie.
No.
All right, because if that's what you meant, and there's some people who believe that nonsense. Okay,
no,
and why call it nonsense? I'm not saying that a player should not, shouldn't be introspection. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that close to 50 years of being an educator has taught me that everybody doesn't have the capacity to do it.
Well, that may be true, but what you're
talking about, Roland, you're quite right. You're saying that the backroom staff locally must also be in a position to do that, and that is all part of the performance.
Whoever continue, you must do an analysis with a fine-tooth comb of every player, right?
Before you find out
strength and weaknesses.
Totally agree. High performance.
Strengthen their strengths and work on those weaknesses, because the opposition will do that.
Correct.
Yes.
You can't wait till you get to play them next.
That's what I meant by keeping the players current. You got to keep them, and some would say even ahead of the game.
Right. Yeah. So that's what we have to do with these players now, as well as we did in Australia.
But it can't be done 2 weeks before tour.
No, there's still areas in every one of the players' game that needs to be improved. Right?
Yeah.
So those have to be identified now and worked on, so that when they do play against England or Australia, and they feel that they have identified a flaw from the last series, and their plan is so and so, you've already counted that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's where we have to go. That's the level that we have to get at in this region. That type of analysis.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Absolutely right. Well, I
agree with you wholeheartedly. The only thing is, Roland, that even when you do that, you're still going to get some guys who are going to struggle at some point. And so what we're both saying, if you encompass both those strategies, you got everything covered.
Yeah. And I want to say something. Deighton was raising about the selectors. Now, for example, look at England, the current England setup. And one of the features of this whole baseball thing I love about is the absolute backing of the player. We look at a guy like Crawley, for example. If Crawley was playing in the West Indies, he'd have been dropped a long time ago. Because here's an opening batsman averaging 20-something, and they're sticking with him, right? Because they feel he has a specific role to play, and that role is a valuable role for them. And they specifically said, I've heard the coach say this, they're not concerned about his average because they know he'll never average, 40 or whatever. But the role that he's going to play, he's going to be a match winner for them.
Who are you talking about, Basil?
Zach
Crawley.
Then the other part, I've been saying this on just to add on to what Roland and Deighton said about the assessment of the players, is that I use the analogy of the NBA. When at one time in the NBA, college players had to play 3 or 4 years before they could come into the NBA. When they changed the rules where a guy just had to play 1 year and out, so that player has not developed all the requisite skills and all the things to be a full-fledged NBA player. They do have the exceptions. So what did the NBA do? One, all the teams have a zillion coaches now, which we call developmental coaches. So when a guy comes in, he is assigned a coach, right? The other thing they did was what they call the G League. So a guy in his development could go shuttle between, if he's not playing a lot, he shuttles between the NBA club and the lower league. So he's building up reps and developing his game. So I have said West Indies, because our standard of cricket is not where it should be, we should have some system of developmental coaches, both for the international and more importantly in the territories, because that's where those guys are going to go back when they come home. The assessment on whatever they got to work on the game, they have those specific coaches to help them work on those areas. So when we see them again, it's a more complete player each time. Unlike what we see, I give an example. They got a youngster right now playing in the under-19s for South Africa, left arm fast bowler. Something, I can't pronounce his name right now.
You won the Man of Match award today.
Yeah, he came to the Caribbean. I remembered him. He was 15 years old when he came 2 years ago for the under-19 World Cup. Now you look at this kid 2 years later at 17. It's a total metamorphosis. I can't believe this is the same kid I saw 2 years ago. Not only is he stronger, not only is he bowling quicker, you listen to him even talk about his game. He understands his game more. So this process that Roland just described, that also enables a cricketer to start to understand their game more, because the more you understand your game, when you go out there in the heat of the battle, you have a better understanding of what part of your game which tools you have to use in this given situation. But when you don't know those things, you revert back to, well, you know what? I can just try to play some shot or something, and you get out, right? For example, from a batting perspective. And that's the thing. I don't think a lot our players, because of our structure, they don't get to develop knowing their games. And you talk to a 15-year-old in Australia, they could tell you about their game inside out at 15, when we got guys playing international that can't do the same thing.
Basil, in my training as a physical education teacher and table tennis coach and so on, I had the privilege of being exposed to not only high-level coaches, but people who train the high-level coaches. And I'm not going to get into the details now because it would take too long. But basically, what you're talking about, they reminded me of what they were sharing when they talked about preparing for a high-level competition, let's say like Olympics and things like that. In cricket, that would be a World Cup and important test series. A lot of test series are important, but obviously there's some that will pull more out of you than others. And they were talking about, let's say, looking years ahead. So right now, this is what, 2024? The next Olympics will be due when?
2028.
28?
This later this year.
Right.
This year.
So the top teams, the top teams are already preparing for the 2032. I talk about preparing the athletes for the 2032 and even beyond that. How do they do that? Because they look at the statistics and the data that will guide and give clues as to the type of, for example, a simple example could be, what is the average age of a gold medal winner in 100 meters? You know, and if that is determined, then they are looking at players who may right now be 12 years old, you know, or 14 years old. Okay, preparing them for down the road. And it doesn't mean that you put them through weights and all sorts of things. It means that you're looking at the health first of all. So from the top of the head down to the toe, all right? And it's ironic that that body part toe has come up. And a toe has been such a big discussion. But the point, you get where I'm coming from. The eyesight, all those things. So a guy at 15, don't be surprised then, Basil, that a guy at 15 in South Africa and any country that takes preparation seriously would understand his game because he's being taught to understand his game.
Yeah, well, that's my point. That's my point. That's my point.
So that's why I said what you were saying. They reminded me of that exposure to that policy, that strategy that is used by countries that take these things very seriously.
Philip, I would just like to make one point before I forget. The submission that I was making before in relation to selection. Where I was talking about roles within the team. You look for roles that players play. Yes. Now, if you look at the Australian team in these test matches, right? Australia also had to look at the role they wanted players to play. Now, most people balked at the idea of Steve Smith opening the batting.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're thinking it would be, oh, Steve Smith is not an opener.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't understand the role that is required. Now, Australia had to look at their team. Cameron Bancroft is the opening batsman. Cameron Bancroft has the most runs in the Shield this year. This year, he's got 600s. He scored 600s. He is the leading opener now to play, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most people would just go and pick him. But Australia had to look at the balance of their team. If they picked Cameron Bancroft to open the innings, it would have meant they would have had to drop either Marsh or Cameron Green, right? Both they felt were important to the balance of their team. Green to bowl, to field in the gully. Marsh as the hard-hitting batsman he is and can bowl, right? So they didn't want to drop one of those. So to ensure that the team is well balanced, Steve Smith stepped up. That is bad luck on Cameron Bancroft because he cannot do any more.
Nope.
But I'm talking about the role. It is not because the guy scores the most runs that he should play. It's the role that is required at the time.
Yeah. I mean, I'm rolling on that point because that exact point you're making about Bancroft and Steve Smith, there were some fellas in Mason Group who rubbished it, including some played for the West Indies. And when Smith failed in the first game, they jumped and said, "Oh, you see, blah, blah, blah." And Smith actually said it is in the second test, and particularly in the chase for the victory, end up 91 not out. Smith made an adjustment, and then he recently came out saying he now has got the more feel for as a role, now comfortable as an opening batsman. And it showed you that people think instant success and just drop to expose Smith to the new ball. Smith was there for the challenge, even to the point. I remember one of the commentators pointed out when Warner and Khawaja opened the batting, they would always swap who gonna face first. Smith faced the ball first in every inning, and one of the reasons to why Smith volunteered and wanted to open because he hates waiting. He hates sitting down watching guys. So he has already got an opener mentality, right? So that's half the battle. And then for him to tell a guy who is the senior opener, I take in the first strike because of all of that. So half the battle is won. And we saw in that last, I mean, it looked like he was batting on a different pitch than the rest of the Australian batters, right?
You know, Basil, my concern was never for Smith opening the batting because, you know, I mean, obviously I haven't played cricket at that level. I don't think Roland has, but I really couldn't think why a guy with the numbers that Smith has put up would not be able to make the adjustment to opening the batting with some degree of success. And this might sound as though I'm putting down the West Indies. I can add to that. He was not trying this against the best fast bowling attack in the world. And I don't say that to diss the West Indies attack. But obviously, if you have an attack when the South African attack is at full strength and everybody's available, there's no let up.
Right.
Here was a West Indies attack that was people like to use the term, led by Alzarri Joseph, who we have every respect for Alzarri Joseph, but he's Alzarri Joseph. Alzarri Joseph is not Pat Cummins. He's not Mitchell Starc, okay? And
he's not Rabada.
And he's not Rabada. And a veteran Roach, who, well, obviously still has a role to play in his side. He's not going to cause anybody sleepless nights for fear of being knocked down, you know? So I really never had an issue with Steve Smith opening or having the competence to open, I should say. But what I've seen since they've done it has, I don't want to say convinced me, but the issue that I would be concerned about if I were part of Australian backroom staff or whatever, isn't Steve Smith opening. It is at number 4 position. Because yes, players can make adjustments. So Cameron Green will have to make many adjustments to convince me that he is the best person for that number 4 position.
Yeah, those are fair points because Roland could probably chime in on this. Cameron Green got some technical issues how he plants his force. He plants that front foot. And because maybe he thinks he's a tall guy, he could get to the ball. And something at number 4, he's gonna see a harder ball more times than not than when he used to bat at number 6. So that and because the Australians, I think the Australians are so high. Again, this goes back to what you were talking earlier. The Australian cricket people are very high on this guy, Cameron Green. They believe he's a once in generation talent. And so therefore they are gonna give him, just like how England gives Zach Crawley to just continue going and they're not gonna throw him out the team. They're gonna give him because he keeps showing them over and over signs of that great ability that they believe he has, both with the ball, the catching, and with the bat. So
and he may very well have it, and he may very well show it at number 4 in time, or he may have to drop down a couple of notches.
Yeah,
but
I remember.
I don't fault them for what they're trying to do.
Yeah, and I remember Australia, this batting lineup is going through a little transition because you don't lose an all-time opening batsman like Dave Warner and go along like nothing happened. The loss of David Warner to this team was palpable against the West Indies. It was palpable in terms of the cohesion of that batting lineup. There's something I think some people may have overlooked because it could have been a different story because Warner took a lot of pressure off of Khawaja.
Yes.
Whereas Smith did not do that right away in this series. Khawaja felt more pressure, I would say, because once Smith got out, nicking off early, not to say Warner don't get out early, but Warner usually takes the attack to the opening bowlers, and Khawaja could just stay in his cocoon and before you look up on the board, he got 75. And you can't remember any great shot he played. But Warner doing the business on the other end, taking that pressure off of
Basil, Deighton's been very quiet, and I know Deighton likes to express himself quite clearly, but one of the reasons why we've gone live today is so that we can, get a little bit of interaction with our viewers, and therefore we can't ignore them completely. And 2 things I'll point out here have been following the comments and so on, and responding where possible. But Wesley Biner says Steve Smith is special. Don't forget he started out playing as a leg spinner and batting at 9 out, and that's true. But what I really want to bring you guys in on, starting with Deighton. There's a guy here, Nick Humphrey, who says he has a question for us. He says, should Holder and company take up the player's spot who played in Australia recently, who performed in that series, or should they go play regional cricket competition? Well, okay, there's a bit of a mix-up there, but what he's trying to ask is, should they be able to get back into the side, or should they have to go and play regional competition and, let's say, earn their right to play? I want to hear you guys address that if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Starting with Deighton.
It's an excellent question, but I wouldn't look at it from the point of view of earning the right to play. I think some of them have already done that. What I would say is to go back to my question about preparation I spoke about earlier. I think people have finally latched on to the fact that white ball cricket is a very different game from test cricket. And a lot of times, and not only in the Caribbean, I'm seeing it with other test teams around the world, guys come back from playing white ball cricket, especially T20, and going to test cricket, and you can see there's an adjustment period when they are not on top of their game in test cricket. So I think he's hit on something important there in terms of how do these guys prepare for test cricket. Now think about it. Let's take Jason Holder, who, by the way, I like very much as a cricketer. But when was the last time Jason Holder played test cricket? When was the last time he played red ball cricket of any kind? And so if the selectors now say, we want him back for England, and there are a number of good reasons why a selector might want him back. My question is, how does he prepare for that? Because I'm sure he'll be completely taken up in the next few months with the T20 World Cup. Does he jump out of that and into test cricket? My answer to the question would be this. I think I wouldn't want those guys to play test cricket. I mean, for the cricket to qualify, but I would like them to play red ball cricket in order to get their red ball game going again.
In preparation.
And so, yes, it's about preparation. And so I would not be in a hurry to rush all of them back into the team because I am sure there will be a period of readjustment and the team could suffer as a result. In the meantime, we have a number of guys here who have no white ball cricket to play, and they have every opportunity to prepare for that test match properly. And Roland has played it. You and I have not, but I'm sure he'll agree with me when I say it has to be the most difficult form of cricket. You really got to buckle down for 5 days. Well, these days sometimes it's 3, but nonetheless, you have to buckle down and you have to be on your game all the time. And I think he's hitting on something really important that there are some guys who will be better prepared for that. They may not be necessarily a better player, but they'll be better prepared for that series in England than these guys who are focusing on T20 cricket in the World Cup.
Basil sorry, go ahead.
You know, I was just going to say, so while there might be space for 1 or 2 of them in the entire squad, I think to go back to Roland's point, you have to think very carefully about the roles you want people to play in England and who's ready to play that role. Like, for instance, a white ball swings a bit, maybe for 2 overs, if you're really lucky 4, and then there's no swing. In England, with a red ball, you should have some bowlers who have been working on swinging the ball, moving it around, and getting those right lines and lengths for that kind of swinging delivery. A guy playing bowling 4 overs in T20 cricket, is he ready for that in England to get the right lines and lengths and to get the ball to swing? Is he ready to bowl 20 overs in a day, having bowled only 4 in a match for 6 months?
I was just raised that.
I think you raised a really interesting point, and I think we got to be very careful how you rush them back to red ball cricket.
Any different views or anything to add, Roland or Basil, on that question? Because I've got another one coming for you.
No, all I would say, Philip, is that with the returning players, don't forget I said you look at a group of 30, so they're part of the 30.
Yeah.
That's all I would say. The group is still 30.
But we've got a viewer here who believes now that the group is 11. Edford says that that playing 11 that we won the game with, I think they should stick with them. Sorry, I apologize to him. His squad is now 12. He says he thinks you should stick with them, but possibly add. He said Carol Mears, but I'm sure he mean Carol Mears. You know how it is with these keyboards on these devices there. And the predictive text come up with some stuff that you would never have imagined. So I'm sure he means Calmeers. So he's got his squad down to 12 based on the 1 test victory. And Nick, thanks you very much for answering the question. I'm going to throw this one to start with to Basil, because I don't want to put Roland on the spot. I'm hoping that he gets back that pick. That I'm hoping that he's still in the squad of, well, not 30. But if in naming 2 or 3 selectors, you've got a pool of 6, I hope Roland's still in that pool.
Yes, me too.
I hope so. But I'm not going to put him on the spot with this particular question. John Seeley, who I think, I know Roland and Deighton will know John Seeley, the journalist. I was going to say the former journalist, but he may take exception to that. The journalist. He says, given Craig Brathwaite's muscular response to House comments about the West Indies being hopeless and pathetic, should our cricketers not be prepared for the off-field negative comments that can come at them? Should the West Indies be prepared up front instead of reacting? Well, actually, I'm going to start that off myself. It's going to be very brief, though. I'm going to simply say, well, clearly Craig was prepared, given the response he made. He was definitely prepared. But let's get your response, Basil.
That statement, as I said to some friends, because I had a little debate about it. I said that's what we call in the United States bulletin locker room, bulletin board material. Because at the end of the day, in elite sport, it's all about you executing, right? if that material is going to help you, motivate you to focus more in your preparation, focus more in the details, etc., etc. So therefore, it translates in your performance. Hey, cool, throw it out at us, because elite athletes often
Make us grovel.
use anything, even though it's not even might be directed at them, to fuel them in, because sometimes training could be really monotonous, and you just thinking about what this guy said, I'm gonna show you, and you keep working and so on. I mean, because I heard some comments about, oh, Rodney Hogg said this about the team, and I said to some of them, we West Indians say worse about our team than what Rodney Hogg said. So what are you guys complaining about? The most important thing is that
we're the only ones supposed to criticize our team.
Yes, they said, according to them, they said it inspired them. Great. That's all it is. Bulletin board material. It happens all the time in elite sport. I mean, as I just was pointing out, Michael Jordan used to take some of the most trivial things somebody would say about him or the Bulls, and he would ride that as hard and to come at you, So
I think Basil, Basil, that's a pretty natural thing. In fact, John Seeley, this is John Seeley, the journalist, and I would imagine that as a journalist, if someone said, for example, but Philip, man, you've got to be a joker, man, but Ben Holder always getting all these scoops, and you bring in stale news all the time. Now, that may or may not be true, but may that not motivate me to work harder to maybe, go out there among my contacts and try to make sure that I can bring a scoop or a much better story. So I think we all have the potential to be triggered by outside forces. Should we depend on that only? Of course not. I should get up and look for stories every day because they pay me to do that and because I love my job. But I think it's natural that somebody can say something that, I can imagine Deighton getting a pair and somebody saying, well, a duck farm joke or something like that. Deighton will go in the nets, and I don't mean now, I mean when he used to play. Deighton go in the nets, and next thing Deighton scores a century. So if nobody had noticed the pair, he might have said, well, in poor form, I'll get back some runs again. But for any time you throw that challenge, he's going to go into the next day and night.
And athletes, and I mean, Roland could talk that he played at the elite level. Athletes would use anything to motivate them, right? And these guys, and you must gotta make sure you're self-motivated as an athlete. Because if you depend on that, and the other thing, teams today now got media that they would monitor all the social media. So any motivation they may be able to find it for you. And
exactly,
you hear what this guy is talking about you, because they got people know that's just their role.
Yeah, they don't want to get in here, don't I? When a guy's got a certain age, you let them say what they have to say before too long. Something called.
I was only going to tell you about negative comments. I remember playing in a game, having not played for a long time. And the first ball I was leg spin, I played forward and I missed. And the guy said, I got a rabbit. And I hit the next two balls on the ground. And he apologized.
He said that?
And he apologized.
I mean, we've heard stories about Viv Richards along a similar
lines,
exactly.
So it is not a new thing. It is just that when you've got a West Indies team that has been doing so poorly and we very seldom do well, these stories will take on more significance. But it's nothing that has not happened before. We've been there before.
I'll tell you something though, Philip. There's something important about that comment that Hogg made. Not some sort of response. The fact that we've been doing poorly. Clearly, and Hogg was not the only one who made a comment, by the way. Steve Wall made some comments that I think were, my view, unkind. I understand what he was trying to say, but they were unkind. And I think people assumed that because we had not been doing well, that these new players must do worse. I think that was where they were coming from. And they were proven wrong only because, as I said to you, I think we prepared for this better than we've done for a long time. And I think what you saw was the result of better preparation. Not that we got guys in the Caribbean that can't play cricket, but we always send them out there. I don't think we prepare them properly for each assignment, and every assignment is different. Like in Bangladesh, I thought the team we picked for Bangladesh that did well was the perfect team for those conditions, and they did well. I think they had been well prepared because we come to the point in the Caribbean where we have a lot of low, slow wickets, and so when we left here and went to Bangladesh, it was not totally alien to us. So that suggests to me that when we have the right preparation, we get better results. I would like to think that we're going to go along that road a little more often. And so it'll be interesting to see how we prepare for the fact that in England, the ball is likely to swing more and maybe even seem a little bit more if we get some grass on those wickets. So I'd like to see how we are going to prepare for that, which might be a little bit more of a challenge in the Caribbean that it is in England.
But Deighton, while you're on the subject of preparation, and forgive me, guys, as I said, I'm trying to address the needs of our viewers as well. And this is a good time to throw this out, although the preparation is different. You're talking about preparation for England, but Mr. Nick is at it again, and he's suggesting that since they're
Who's this?
One of our viewers, Nick
Right.
Humphrey.
Uh-huh.
He's suggesting that since 3 to 4 months before the World Cup, you're preparing for the World Cup now, and he's wondering if you shouldn't pick the team early, so that preparation then maybe can be focused on the actual people selected. I've got my own views on that, but I'll leave it to one of you brave guys to share your thoughts on that.
They probably will, because they probably may pick the team after the first class season, which will be done in May or something like that.
But that's not so early. The World Cup is in June. I think.
Yeah. Oh, you talking about the World Cup? You talking about the World Cup?
He's talking about the World Cup. Yeah, that's why I said that it's a different type of preparation. But
Here's how I see it.
Yeah.
So here's how I see this.
About the team going to England in
No. He's talking about World Cup. Yeah, you were saying, David?
We just played a T20 series against England.
Uh-huh.
We are now about to play a T20 series against Australia.
Uh-huh.
Surely, the people that we picked in those two teams must be the ones that we are thinking are somewhere close to the team that we select.
Roland's 30.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I feel that this is an opportunity to look at people and finalize, to use Roland's words, I like, finalize rules. So you have an opportunity here to show a few players against England. If there are one or two more you need to look at them now. But you've got to be close now, because having seen what we did against India last year in the T20 series, what we did against England, and what we are going to one in Australia, these are opportunities for us to say these are the guys that I see making us the best team in the world over the next 3, 4, 5 years. So I would be shocked if selectors suddenly come up in May and pick 15 guys, none of whom played in these teams.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So I think we're on that road already to finalize that. I think they must have a clear idea of the 20 guys who are ahead of the pack. And these series are giving us an opportunity to fine-tune that idea of picking guys for roles.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for instance, if I was a selector right now, I would make sure I find a way to get Hayden Walsh Jr. in the team, because he offers something different that we haven't had in the last couple of series. So whether he makes the final team or not, this is an opportunity for us to have another look and say, do we have a role for this guy in the World Cup? And then after that, having had a look at everybody, I think I can now finalize down to I think it's going to be a squad of 15. I think that puts you in a good position, having seen them against India, Australia, England, which are all good teams in this format. After that, I think you're pretty clear on the 15 guys that should go.
Philip, can I jump in, because I have to also jump out very, very quickly?
Yes. Before you jump out, I have something I want you to share with us, though. So I hope you can spare another 5 minutes. But go ahead.
It's gonna have to be very quick, because I have family duties to go and deal with from overseas. So
jump in quickly.
Right. What I'm saying is, I mentioned 30 players, so you've got 15 roles and 15 replacements. So the 30 is there for a long time.
No,
As
no,
Deighton
Roland, we
says-
do,
as
but
Deighton says-
sometimes we do pork fine, but
As Deighton's saying, it's about fine tuning now.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, Roland, before you go though,
Yeah.
very quickly, we heard Craig Braffett note that he only met Shamar Joseph on tour. Okay, obviously the selectors knew of him long before Braffett did. So tell us the Shamar Joseph story that you guys were able to pick him with such confidence, because I know that you were aware of him long before Braffett.
Well, I think also when I jump out, Basil can complete the story because he's fully aware of what happens in Ghana. But what I would say is, I think probably it's 2022, myself and Andy Roberts were invited by the Berbice Cricket Board, by Hilbert Foster, the president, and the club and the board. They invited Andy Roberts and myself to come to Berbice to do a clinic. While we were there, I guess I will fill in from that point, but Basil can pick up the points before that as to how Shamar actually got into the setup in Georgetown, etc., etc. He has the full story. But, I had a conversation with Shamar then, and we discussed, thought he was very talented, and if he took the game seriously and he really wanted to work hard, that he would make it. Now, I forgot about that conversation. And then during the 50-over competition in Trinidad, he came and he sat down and he said, did you remember so-and-so? And he did say, well, about 8 months later, I decided to take the game seriously. But getting now to Shamar being selected, now, Deighton said earlier that selectors, which is Desmond and myself, I don't think any other selectors have ever watched as much cricket as the two of us. We watch every single game. So we were in Antigua last year for the first class tournament. Desmond was at Sir Vivian Richards. Desmond was at Coolidge, and I was at Sir Viv Richards Stadium, and Ghana were playing Barbados. Now, at a late stage, Ransford Beaton was injured, and he was replaced by Shamar Joseph, who promptly picked up 5 wickets in the game. True to form, next game, Beaton was back, he was dropped. But during that game, when I went back to the hotel, me and Desmond always met and discussed the day's play, etc., etc. I told Desmond I've seen this boy who I believe is a genuine article. And it really, the discussion started from there. So that was back in February last year, from his very first game. As I've said in other reports this last week, he didn't bowl any different here in Australia than he did in that first game. So it tells you that, he is someone who is able to repeat what he has over and over again. Because that first game in Antigua, he bowled exactly the same.
He hits that beautiful length over and over and over.
Right. 50 over in Trinidad, we had some good conversations there. But that's how he came about. And obviously he went to South Africa on the 18 tour, picked up, as Deighton said, he picked up a fifer there. He goes to Australia, he picks up a fifer in the first game and another in the second. So you can see that whatever level he was able to play at, that he was able to perform straight from the off. Because, as I said, he got 5 on debut in his first class debut. So we saw very early that, here was a guy with the genuine credentials to be an international bowler. How he performed in Australia is really unbelievable. I mean, I always believed that he would do well in Australia because, you know, as I said to him many times, even during the tour of Australia, you know, we spoke quite often that you've got the game for Australia's conditions. You know, you're a fast bowler who keeps the ball up to the bat. Quick through the air, also got a good bouncer. Perfect for Australia. And you've only got to look at the successes in Australia. Hazelwood and Cummins, they don't bang the ball in the pitch all the time. They bowl good areas, good lengths. So I always believed that he would be a success in Australia. Maybe not to the degree that he has, because really, I mean, what he's produced here is mind blowing. But definitely had the potential. You know, and there's some players who just have that ability to perform at the higher level. You know, and there's some players who at first class level looks quite ordinary, but when they step up, you see something different. Yeah, I'm very pleased for him, and as I said, for the team who, you know, really made the Caribbean, and not just the Caribbean, but made all West Indians around the world. And I'll tell you, a huge part of Australia made them smile as well, because the calls that I've been receiving from friends in Australia right throughout the series, you wouldn't believe that they were Australian supporters, and you know how diehard Australian supporters are about their own team.
Well, I think Tim Payne had a problem with that, though.
Well, he did,
he
but
did.
he's in a minority. I can tell you, they love those guys.
But he is a pain.
And especially Shamar, the energy and that he brought to the thing reverberated with the spectators.
Yeah.
And he's a cult hero right now. But you know, he's got a long way to go. This is only the beginning of his career, and you know, I wish him all the best in the future.
Okay, Roland, thanks so much for spending some time with us.
It's a great pleasure.
Just before Roland goes, please, I'd really like to say this before he goes. I want to publicly congratulate him for the role he's played in getting a girls' program going in Passage Road here in Barbados. You know how I've always lamented the fact that there's no real development of the women's game in the Caribbean. And I'm so happy that somebody has done it. Philip, not Philip, sorry. Roland, I'd like to publicly say, you know, well done to actually go there and do it when nobody else seems to be stepping up, including any of the associations around the region. But well done.
Well, thank you, Deighton. And yeah, Philip, Deighton really has been a flag bearer for women's cricket for a long, long time. So, you know, I'm just happy to be able to assist where I can. I think we've got a very good group of persons involved, mainly females, because it is a female club, who really will run the operation. And, you know, we've got some very good support. I mean, Alina has come on board as a global ambassador. So, you know, I'm really looking forward to seeing the girls' club develop and really try to assist the game, not just in Barbados, but across the region as well.
And Roland, if you're going to leave the country, you've got to check with me first, because it is my intention very, very soon, that may very well be our next show, who knows, to look closely at that whole women's project. You've been keeping me informed. I've got some material that I haven't fully utilized as yet, and I do plan to utilize that. Of course, I'll be joined on Deighton. I'm glad you put it in such a nice way. You said that he's been a flag bearer. A more mischievous person like Basil might have said Deighton likes the girls, and that could easily be misunderstood. So
I couldn't say that, because I'm equally as passionate about women's cricket since I first got involved back in 2008. That, you know, wherever women's cricket is playing around the world, I'm watching. Because just last night, so I was watching South Africa against Australia. And it was funny. I was watching the game a couple of nights ago, because I'm here in Florida with my youngest brother's house. And he was in the kitchen, and he was marveling of how I was calling out all the women on the South African team and the Australian team. He was like, boss, you really know this women cricket? I said, yes. You call a name of the women play around the world, I could tell you about them.
Guys, has he done
Well,
enough then to
Philip,
earn
thank you.
a
I'm
pick
gonna
on
have
the
to go
panel
now
for that
because,
episode?
but Basil can fill you in on how Shamar actually got into Guyana cricket. When
Yes.
he can give you the background.
Okay, thanks a lot, Roland.
All right,
pleasure.
Roland, talk to you soon.
Right. So Basil, the floor is yours.
What I was told, I'm not going to call his name because but somebody who played for Guyana and is close to Kevin Sinclair. He was on holiday in Guyana, and he said he and Sinclair after doing some work with him, they went over to watch a football match in New Amsterdam, where Sinclair lives and he is from, and where young Joseph lives. And right on the field where the football was playing, near the football, Joseph, his church was having like a fun day. And he was bowling, they're playing cricket. And the guy said, he played first class. He was like, what? So he asked Sinclair, who is this guy? Sinclair said, yeah, we played in school, but he don't really play cricket because he got a church, Seventh-day Adventist. And he got a wife and, or at the time, fiance and child, and he worked in the security. So he insisted to have him call the guy over. And he had a conversation with him. And, he took him to Georgetown the next day because he knew the coach, Crandon, where the Guyana team was training. And all of these things is like divine intervention. You hear this guy's story. The youngster
You did mention that he was heavily involved in church, so that should not surprise you.
Yes, right. The youngster has a relative in Sophia as a part of Georgetown, where maybe he could stay while in Georgetown. So they go driving around looking to find the relative. They can't find the relative, so they stop somewhere to get some food. When they stop to get the food, lo and behold, who's walking by? The relative, right?
Wonderful.
Then, right. So
Wonderful.
when he takes him where the guy and the team is training, they do the yo-yo test. He comes in third in the yo-yo test. And then when he went and bowled to them in the nets, Leon Johnson, all of them, he had them. And I think the next day, he gets a call from Crandon, and Crandon says, we're going to sign him to a developmental contract. Right?
Nice. Wonderful.
Right? But
Beautiful.
the thing about it, is almost like, what Roland said based on his conversation when he went to Barbies a few months later, is after that conversation, the youngster told him late last year that he really decided to really go serious, because this is what happens. Yeah, you sign a developmental contract, but it's almost like this is what happens. It's unfortunately, it's like a new toy. They put you up in the cupboard and close the cupboard, because they're never seriously looking at you as being somebody that could come into the side developmental contract. So you're always on the outside, so to speak, right? And that's a disappointing thing, because developmental contract means there should be a lot of focus on you because you're there to develop, right? And so we didn't really hear about, there was another guy who was a new guy, came in, named Cameron, and played in 2022. And then Joseph got into the team in 2023. It was his second match where he got the 5-wicket haul, right? And
I think the first match was against Barbados, and the second was against the Windward, I think.
Windwards. He got 5 in the second innings against Windwards, right? He ended up only playing 3 of the 5 matches for Guyana. Now, if a guy, when we watched because I seen him play, I saw the 5-wicket haul. because you know the stream and everything. But on the stream, you really can't tell sometimes how quick a guy is bowling, right?
Yes.
But it's obviously this guy's been bowling quick, because when we finally got to see him playing in the CPL and we saw the speedometer in the game he played, the screen come up 141. I was like, what? Is so fast this guy bowls? Now, how you could got a 141 guy, get 5 wickets, and you put him back on the bench? And West Indies, we are looking for fast bowlers. You know? So, I mean, that's why when I heard, and I didn't listen to Mason's show yesterday, for one reason, because this over bloviating and all these prime ministers, as soon as I heard all of them coming, I said, I'm not going to be listening. But I heard an excerpt of the president of the Guyana board talking about all the there are many Shamar Josephs. And I'm saying, why nobody on the show didn't ask him, well, what the hell are you doing in Guyana then? What are you doing to facilitate if we have other Josephs to unearth? Right? Rather than, I'm just saying this now, the guy who facilitated the clinic where Roberts and Roland came, previous to them, Ambrose, you, the president of the Guyana board, always trying to undermine this guy. Right? So are you really doing anything to facilitate these petty politics that end up messing up where the development and unearthing or facilitating of players' development? But you see, unfortunately, on Andrew's show, he ain't had me on the show last night, because if he had me on the show, he would have had to answer those questions rather than seemingly to shed crocodile tears. He's emotional, right? This guy, Joseph, in my view, is embarrassed them more than anything else with what he went out there and do. You know? Embarrassed them as far as I'm concerned, because we got a guy, a gem like this, and you guys, this guy had a chance to play in the first class, and he gets to play only 3 out of the 5 games. Something is not, we're not doing the right thing by our players. You know, because I thought he was just like, because again, on the screen, I couldn't tell how fast he's bowling, because the year previous, the guy Cameron who played, I said, oh, maybe he's just like another Cameron. Not realizing this guy was the real deal. You know? And when you listen to what Roland they got to see him in person in the first class, the same way he bowled there, the same way he bowled. Well, in South Africa, I saw them games like Deighton. I watched those games. And even one of my friends, a guy got a podcast, came out early when he bowled in South Africa. Joseph has to go to Australia because he saw in his spell, he hasn't seen any West Indian bowler bowl like that in 20 years, right? And he did exactly the same thing, just like he bowled in South Africa. It was exactly the same way he bowled in Australia. And if you could go back and look at those clips of when he got the 5 wickets, he was beating all of these guys for pace. LBW with I remember left-hand, he came around the wicket and the left-hand again knocked on the pad before he could move the bat. And that's when I realized how fast that guy was really bowling. After seeing him in the CPL and seeing 140 come up on the screen, no, that's a providence. Now yes. Imagine that on a nice bouncy, pacey South Africa wicket. That seems like it's 10 miles faster, you know? Yeah, but I am so happy for him. I'm so happy for him. You know, I got a chance to speak with him. I was on one of Mason's show when they had him before he went to Australia. And his confidence, I was like, this guy got something. I said that in my mind, because he was confident of doing something in Australia, you know. And you know, I was like, interesting. And then when he when he started out, I see what he was talking about, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know, a concern here that first of all, we must be doing something right because we've got a basketballer among our viewers.
Oh.
Guy called Terry Innings. He says, I hope our coaches prepare Shamar for when the scouting report is on him. And I would suggest that Terry made that remark because he probably missed the earlier session when we were addressing just that, the whole high performance.
Correct. Yes.
What I label high performance, but what you guys
Correct.
described in detail.
Yeah.
So yes, Terry, that was addressed early in the show where without even using that title or that brand,
High performance,
supported by Roland and Basil didn't object.
yes,
Outlined exactly what
Mhm.
I was talking about or what I had been talking about when they talk about high performance program. And yes, it would include what you're talking about there, not only waiting until fellas develop problems and fixing them, but keeping them ahead of the game by virtually anticipating what they will have to deal with. Of course, that may very well be more necessary with our batsmen, but the bowlers too will need some tweaks as well as we go forward.
Yeah, because think of this. There's a thing they call a term we talk about in coaching, called arrested development, where you see players, they're about 16, 17, and they get great success and they think they arrived. And they stay at that level. They might get some success in their 20s and so on. But the really great players never think they arrive. They're always continually looking to improve their game, because in doing so, they're able to, and use the term technique. Technique is your ability, from a batting perspective, is your ability to answer all the questions, or as much answer the questions posed to you by the bowlers, right? So if you are a batter, Steve Smith is a great example. This is a guy that, reinvents himself, it seems, every time you see him almost, right? Because he is constantly never satisfied at where he is, that he knows, saying that I can get better. And that's the attitude our batters have to take. There's something I wanted to say in terms of this same thing. Me, for one, every one of those batters that we sent were in Australia. They all had to raise their game to compete in Australia. I don't want to see no backsliding when they come and play this first class season. I want to see every one of them building on that level they raised themselves to continue to build in improving all the aspects of their game. So therefore, I'm not looking to, my expectation, none of them should be averaging no 20 or 30 or even 40 in the first class season. They're supposed to be in the 50s and above, because after going through that baptismal and you come back home, one, you played on some wickets that were tricky. You're not going to see no wickets like that in the Caribbean. And the quality of bowling is nowhere going to be there. So you can't backslide. And that's something our players have to always have in their mind, especially the ones who go to the international level and they come back and play at the local domestic level. Their performances must always be exceptional. And one thing that will help, now those bowlers are going to have to work harder to get them out. What that means now, the standard of our game, of the games now gets lifted. And that's what we've been crying for, to have the standards of our cricket lifted. And that's how that's one way in which it could get lifted.
Basil, before we hand over to Deighton, and I'm going to be looking to, closing comments and not restricting those closing comments to any particular thing. Just ensuring that you get the chance to express whatever it is you haven't had the chance to express before. So before we go to Deighton to start that off, one thing I will say, you're not going to find me among the people who go overboard, ready to throw away and look at the next next big thing in town. I've seen movies of a similar nature, to do that. I've seen too many players come and you know, the pathway. I will say again for those who joined recently, if my list of batsmen over the past 30 years who have maintained a standard, who have not declined rapidly after a good start. Gail, Chanderpaul, Lara, you asked me to throw Star one in there because he was averaging just about 40 or so. I don't know if I missed one or two, but the vast majority, that must be well 90-somebody% of our batsmen who have been introduced to Test cricket over the past 30 years have declined rapidly after good starts. Some may have had poor starts and never, never got going, dropped after 2 or 3 games. I'm not talking about that. Those guys may not have the chance to make the adjustment, and they lost their play rather early. We're talking even Carlos Brathwaite, really and truly. You bring a guy in primarily for his bowling, but he shows you that he can handle the Australian. I think it was the bowling that he faced at the time. I think he scored some of those runs against Australia. Scored a couple of half centuries.
Got 2 half centuries, yeah.
And we decided that if he get the wickets we want, we didn't care how many runs he scored, he gone. We've treated talent as though it is something that is just in the open ocean up there, and you can just get as much of it as you want. But anyhow, that's being long-winded. The point I really want to make is that while I'm not going to jump on bandwagons and profess this and this player is going to do that, I like the move that I've seen from Mackenzie so far. One of my biggest concerns about Mackenzie is that he was not consistent. He was fortunate to be selected basically on the strength of 1 innings. And the selectors saw something that they like. Now, I'm not even going to go down the road if they were justified in seeing it, if it is really there. That's a different debate. I'm saying it's fortunate to be selected with very few performances. Okay? And even after that, you didn't see that consistency. Speaking purely off the top of my head, I didn't check anything, so if I'm wrong, correct me. But he scored a half century in the first test, and I think he got into the second innings, didn't he?
The 20s in the second innings.
And in the second test, he got into the 40s and then into the 20s. So in actual fact, he's scored at least 20 on each of the 4 innings so far. Now, he's got something to build on there. And I prefer to see guys score. I know, look, cricket people, you all love centuries. Y'all love centuries. I think some cricket fans would be satisfied if a fella scored a century and got to do nothing else. And that's where cricket is at. But I remember there was a guy called Lockhart Sebastian who opened for the Windwards back in the days when cricket was what it was. And Lockhart Sebastian was a staple in the Combined Islands and or Windward Islands side, whichever it was at the time, because they were Combined Islands. He was a staple. They would never even consider dropping him. But he only scored his first century within, I think, maybe his last 2 years of his career. But the man was consistent.
In the 80s.
I wouldn't even venture to say how many half centuries he scored, but he was consistent in giving the team good starts. And that's why I'm about really with cricket. Yes, I can get excited about a century like anybody else. I dropped asleep at certain points in time, and I was a bit disappointed to wake up and realize that Hodge and Smith had fallen short of a century. But I got over that within seconds because they contributed significantly. I want to see consistency. I would rather a guy finish his career with 3 centuries and 40-somebody half centuries. And I mean that because it means that every time he comes up to bat, he's contributing.
Yeah. I have no quarrel with that.
So Deighton,
yes, sir.
The floor is yours for as long as you need it.
Yeah. A couple of things. I spoke earlier about leadership. I just want to specifically say I was very pleased to hear the number of players who keep hinting or already saying that they like the confidence that Craig Brathwaite placed in them. I think I got to give him some kudos for obviously getting the best out of these young men. They seem to be responding to his leadership, and I hope he goes that way. There seems to be some really good planning going on these days, because I used to question once in a while Craig's tactics on the field, but I have to say in this last series, the tactics on the field were excellent. There were some really good examples of really good work that worked the batsman out. But I'm glad, especially to see how he seems to be getting these guys to approach the game with the right attitude. So I specifically mentioned the coaching team earlier, but I also mentioned him as part of what is giving these guys confidence to go there and really get a job done. So that's one thing. Secondly, we see what is possible because we seem to have forgotten since we lost Marshall and Garner and Holding and Roberts. What is possible when you have really high quality fast bowling? And I'm hoping that we understand we have to really develop the others that are waiting in the wings. Now, obviously, Jaden Seal has shown that he can contribute at the test level. He's recovering from an injury now, and I trust that they keep working with him to keep improving his game. And I really would like to see Jaden Seal bowling in England because we all know he has that lovely upswinger, which in my view, by the way, he always lands too wide of the wicket. So I would hope that we see a situation where he turns up in England, if he's fit enough to play in England, and starts landing that outswinger on or about the off stump or middle and off, and make people really play at it.
Correct.
I see some others that we took to South Africa, so I'm glad to see we took McAllister and Hakeem Jordan down there. Surprisingly, Hakeem Jordan hit the scene swinging the ball quite a lot. I noticed in South Africa I didn't see as much swing. I'm not quite sure why, if it was the ball or if something's gone wrong with his action, but he wasn't swinging the ball in South Africa.
In South Africa, the ball already swing that much. It would you would more get see movement more than anything.
So anyway, what I did notice about him was that I think when the ball is not swinging, he has to make a little bit of an adjustment in terms of his lines because he was a little bit off every now and then. But he still bowled well in South Africa. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that when the ball is not swinging, you just got to be careful a little bit. You got to make an adjustment to your lines because he was still getting the ball to move off the seam.
Yes,
and that was good. So I'm saying that overall we got to now work very much on having that conveyor belt, especially in this day when we're playing so much by ball cricket. When you take a player like Alzari Joseph, who's a 3-format player, we cannot rely on the two Josephs to bowl us to victory in every test match. We have to have at least 5 or 6 of them there that we can rest Alzari, we can bring somebody in when somebody's injured, as is the case now with Jaden Seal, that there should be a ready-made replacement.
exactly.
So I want to see us doing that. We got a couple of young guys there in South Africa right now who have been a little bit worried because of their lack of control. Got some good tools. Let me get that clear. They have some good tools.
Torn is one at the top of the list, but the control.
Yeah. So Philip, I won't say high performance, but I want to see us preparing those boys properly for the higher level. So that when I see them again, I want to see more control. Actually, there's a guy in South Africa who, strangely enough, I don't know how I missed him before. I've never seen him bowl before, but I like what I'm seeing from him, called Renico Smith. Lovely run up to the crease, beautiful run up, and he's getting something done with the ball. So I'm saying let's develop them well, because we always talking about the batsmen, but let's make sure we have that conveyor belt there to produce some good fast bowlers. And my last comment would be to reinforce what I said earlier and what Roland added to so nicely about us analyzing what our guys are doing and making adjustments when people figure out how to bowl at them. We really have to make sure this crop can stay relevant for 10 years and not, as you say, come up there, do well, and then fade away. Because we know why they fade away. We know the other teams are going to study them. They're going to work out bowling plans on how to bowl our batsmen. They're going to figure out how to bat against our bowlers. And what we got to do when they make those adjustments is we must have some kind of plan as to how we prepare people to make adjustments to counter whatever the opposition is doing. So those are my final comments. I really like to see us do that and to get that conveyor belt of fast bowlers going.
I would pick up just quickly on what your last point there, because as we were saying, to add to it, is to refine the strengths and to improve the weaknesses. So those weaknesses now, when they're gonna pounce on it, you have a counter because you have developed that weakness to where you can counter when they are because that's what they're always gonna come at, right? the other thing about the conveyor belt, something I noticed, because I hadn't seen Australia's under-19 play in the World Cup yet. And I heard somebody say about they got some fast bowlers. Well, I love seeing fast bowlers. So I made sure I tuned into the game with them in England this morning. And I saw they had a youngster there, and I heard the commentators mentioning that youngster, some Vidler, I think his name is, he was measured at bowling at 144. And then they have another one in the team that didn't play today who topped out at 145. And what it seemed what they're doing in this World Cup, they're rotating these youngsters, right?
Yeah.
Because they have refined the science of to give their bowler, especially in the formative stages in the development, so they don't fall prey to the injury factor. And these are some of the things, because in Australia, one of the things they do at 15 and 16, the top young bowlers around the country, they bring them in and they put all these gadgets on them and they bowl. So if they got any kind of quirks in their action that biomechanically that can be, with they continue doing it, could lead to a back injury or blah, 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 they correct it at that point.
Basil, that's the sort of thing. You remember when I was talking about my experience with that? That's the type of thing. That's an excellent example of what I'm talking about.
Right. So and some of these things are not $1 million and $1 million. We have to be very strategic in the areas that we could invest in high performance at a decent cost, because if we don't, we're going to be far behind. I once made a statement. Every club around the Caribbean, if they got a first division team, they should be facilitated with an analyst kit, the laptop and the camera. So at the club level, guys would learn how to prepare. There's an operative word Deighton been saying all evening. The guys could learn to prepare as an elite player. So this skill of preparation as an elite player starts at the club level, which happens elsewhere on the age group levels in Australia and them places, South Africa. Youngsters of analysts is part of their routine. Not until not like us, is until a guy get to the first class level, might be the first time he interact with an analyst. But if you can do those things from club, all of those things are going to help to lift the standard of the players, i.e. lift the standard of the game. And that is one of the biggest issues with our cricket, because in the past, in our golden era, players with all the flaws that we see that get to the regional level never got there, because somewhere along the line they got found out, and if they were not able to make the adjustment because of the high quality of our cricket at domestic level, they were not going to get into a Barbados team or a Trinidad team or Guyana team with all the flaws that we see guys coming through today. Just because the level was so high, they're going to drop off in the side. Is what the term we would say, progress or perish, right? And I have always thought that one of the areas why we are where we are is because the standard of our cricket is not as competitive as it used to be, and we got to figure out how to do that.
Basil, thanks so much for your insight. So to Deighton Smith, and I don't know the extent to which our viewers recognize the experience here. Yes, Roland Butcher was with us. He brings the practical experience, having played at the highest level, and that has excellent value. You guys have been involved in cricket administration and organization and whatever you want to call it, all the things connected to cricket, in many different ways. And that insight and that experience, when you combine that with the experience of those people who've been out there and done it all, we really should have the resources in the region to do a lot better. I think it would take a series of 10 shows or so to examine the reasons why we haven't been able to do that. Most people would say that it begins with the letter P. You know, but the politics is a part of life.
Yep.
And we can't allow that to dampen our spirits. And of course, we're not talking about any particular political party or anything like that. We're talking about all the things that creep into a situation that should not really be in there. Whether that be politics in the sense that we know it, or whether it be other things. But we've got the knowledge and we've got the skills. We claim we don't have the money, but I'm one of these people who believe that on some level you've got the money to do anything you want to do. What you don't have is the money to do everything you want to do. So therefore, it's a question of priorities. And in this part of the world, we do things backward. We've got sporting organizations that finance sports, various sports. To qualify for that, you usually got to perform at a high level at the regional level at least. Now, how are you going to perform at a high level at the regional level if your opponents are getting the support that allows them to do that? So you see, you never get there. Just the odd guy will get there. What we really need to do is to recognize the potential from early and put the support behind it, so that when you do get to that regional level, you can represent yourself. And then, of course, if you want to flood more funds, that's fine. So that long-winded rap there is simply maybe a plea to those who are the decision makers. You got to get up and do a little bit more, because it's not only cricket that is struggling. A lot of our sports are struggling, and really and truly, it's not just about the talent of the athlete. The backroom people are the ones who really have to offer that support. Any closing thoughts, Deighton? Are you closed already?
No, I said what I had to say. I don't want to
Repeat yourself.
go. I put too many things out there. But it's good to just to ruminate on a few things and get them right.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Basil?
Same here. I think we have covered all the bases for now.
Okay. So thanks to you. Thanks to Deighton.
All right.
And very special thanks to our many viewers who not only came in and watched and listened, but made comments and in some cases asked questions. If we didn't get to respond to your comments, don't take that personally. You would appreciate that with a fairly big panel and lots to talk about, we really couldn't get to everyone. So all the more reason why you should join us next time when we meet to chit chat on anything cricket.
Right.
Let's talk. Bye for now.